Diana Ross, at 81, reveals what she kept hidden about Michael Jackson for decades. For over 5 decades, whispers surrounded the bond between Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, whispers of love, obsession, and secrets buried beneath the glitz of Motown. Now, at 81, Diana has finally broken her silence, and what she revealed changes everything we thought we knew about the King of Pop. This isn't just a story of mentorship, it's a story of forbidden love, shattered trust, and a truth hidden for years. Are you ready to uncover the confession that shook the music world? Stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and join Legends of Black Excellence as we expose the untold truth. Diana Ross. Diana Ross has spent more than 6 decades at the top of the entertainment world. But only now, at 81 years old, has she finally revealed the truth about her most mysterious bond with Michael Jackson. For decades, fans speculated about what really tied Motown's leading lady to the King of Pop. Ross's recent confession confirms what many suspected: their connection was far deeper than the public ever imagined. Their story began in 1969 when the Jackson 5 signed with Motown. While Berry Gordy orchestrated the group's launch, it was Diana who became the face of their discovery. Michael, then just 11, was placed under her wing, even moving into her Los Angeles home for over a year. To the public, she was a mentor guiding young talent. In private, she became Michael's sanctuary. He affectionately called her Mama, but also hinted at something more by playfully calling her his girlfriend. Those around them saw that his devotion to Ross was unique, part childlike awe, part budding romantic admiration. As years passed, Michael's feelings intensified. He often described Ross as the standard of beauty and elegance, the woman who defined his idea of love. He carried photographs of them together, built a secret room in his home filled with her images, and openly admitted that she was the most important woman in his life. In interviews, he confessed that he wanted to marry her, brushing aside concerns about their 14-year age difference. By the mid-1980s, rumors of an engagement swirled after fans spotted a ring on Ross's finger during the Motown 25 television special. But family pressure and media scrutiny intervened. Michael's mother, Katherine Jackson, strongly objected, fearing that Diana's age and public reputation would harm her son. Headlines mocked Ross as a cradle robber, and the backlash became too much. Diana eventually distanced herself by marrying Norwegian businessman Arne Næss Jr. in 1985. Yet Michael's heartbreak poured into his music. Songs like Dirty Diana Carts, Remember the expressed longing for love lost. Despite these tensions, their bond never broke. Ross remained one of the few people Michael trusted unconditionally. In 2002, his will named her as the secondary guardian of his children, proof of his lasting devotion and her irreplaceable role in his life. For years, Ross avoided direct commentary, perhaps to protect both their legacies. Now, at 81, she has finally spoken without hesitation. In rare interviews and public reflections, she admitted, "I was crazy about Michael, and I loved him a lot. He was my inspiration. He was a gentle and wonderful human being, one of the special ones in this universe." These words, coming after decades of silence, transform speculation into confirmation. For Diana Ross, this is not just a revelation, but a reclaiming of history. Her confession frames Michael not as a myth or a headline, but as the man she loved, guided, and cherished. At last, the truth she withheld for so long gives fans a glimpse into one of music's most enduring and complicated love stories. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's life was lived under a relentless spotlight, yet his most powerful emotional truth remained hidden until Diana Ross. His lifelong muse finally confirmed it at age 81. For decades, speculation swirled about their extraordinary connection. Was it a bond of mentorship, friendship, or a love story the world wasn't ready to accept? Diana's recent confession proves what Michael himself often hinted: she was the deepest love of his life. Michael first encountered Ross as a boy in 1969 when the Jackson 5 joined Motown. Though executives credited Diana with discovering the group, The reality was more complex. Gladys Knight and Suzanne DePass had first spotted their talent. But publicity aside, Michael's relationship with Diana quickly grew personal. He moved into her home in Los Angeles for a year, where she nurtured his confidence and taught him the intricacies of stagecraft. To others, she was his mentor. To Michael, she was far more. He affectionately called her Mama, yet he also teased that she was his girlfriend, revealing a boyhood crush that never truly faded. As he matured, Michael's feelings deepened into genuine love. He carried photographs of them together, wrote about her in his autobiography, Moonwalk, and once admitted to a journalist that he wanted to marry her. The 14-year age gap didn't concern him. He believed Diana was timeless. By the mid-1980s, rumors exploded when fans noticed her wearing a ring he had given her. Insiders claimed Diana briefly agreed to his proposal, but the relationship unraveled under public scrutiny. His mother, Katherine Jackson, strongly objected, and the media ridiculed the pairing with cruel headlines. The fallout cut Michael deeply. He expressed his heartbreak through music, encoding fragments of their relationship into his songs, The Fiery Track. Dirty Diana, often misinterpreted as an attack on groupies, was believed by many insiders to be about Ross herself, his bitterness at feeling betrayed. On the other hand, Lamb captured the sweetness of their early years together. Quincy Jones, horrified by the original sharpness of Dirty Diana, even persuaded Michael to soften the lyrics to disguise the personal attack. Yet those close to him knew the truth. Despite the distance, Ross never left Michael's heart. At award shows, she sat on his lap, blew him kisses from the stage, and their chemistry was undeniable. More tellingly, in his 2002 will, Michael named Diana as the guardian of his children if his mother Katherine could no longer fulfill the role. For a man as private and cautious as Michael, such a choice revealed an unshakable trust and lifelong devotion. When Diana Ross finally admitted publicly in 2025 that she had loved him, "I was crazy about Michael, and I loved him a lot." She confirmed the secret he had carried all his life. To Michael, she wasn't just a mentor or a friend. She was the woman who embodied love, beauty, and loyalty. His truth was written in music, hers in silence until now. Berry Gordy Jr. No story about Diana Ross and Michael Jackson can be told without Berry Gordy Jr., the visionary founder of Motown Records. Gordy was not only the man who discovered countless stars, but also the figure who orchestrated the environment that first bound Ross and Jackson together. His influence, personal, professional, and emotional, became the backdrop against which their complicated relationship unfolded. By the late 1960s, Gordy was already a dominant force in American music. Motown, founded in 1959, had produced chart-topping acts such as The Supremes, The Temptations, and Stevie Wonder. Diana Ross, Motown's Golden Girl, was not only Gordy's greatest star, but also his lover. Their affair, lasting much of the 1960s, produced a daughter, Rhonda Ross, in 1971. Though Gordy's romantic involvement with Diana was an open secret in the Motown circle, he also positioned her as the label's glamorous face, a decision that would have lasting consequences when the Jackson 5 arrived. In 1969, Gordy introduced the Jackson 5 to the world with Diana Ross as their supposed discoverer. For publicity, he credited her with finding the group, even though Gladys Knight and Motown executive Suzanne DePass had first recognized their talent. To solidify the narrative, he placed the young Jacksons under Diana's wing, ensuring Michael, then just 11 years old, lived with her in Los Angeles. Gordy's decision linked Ross and Jackson in the public imagination, while also giving Michael intimate access to the woman who would become his lifelong muse. But Gordy's presence was not only professional. His romantic history with Diana cast a shadow over her later closeness with Michael. While Michael adored Ross with pure devotion, insiders knew that Diana's past with Gordy complicated matters. Marrying Michael could have meant scandal, given that she had already been involved with the powerful label boss and had a child with him. Gordy's dominance at Motown and his history with Diana created boundaries Michael could never fully overcome. Still, Gordy admired Michael's extraordinary talent. He compared the boy's charisma to James Brown and Sammy Davis Jr., and he carefully managed the Jackson 5's early image. For publicity, he even shaved 2 years off Michael's age, presenting him as a 9-year-old prodigy rather than 11. Behind the scenes, however, Gordy recognized the deep attachment Michael was forming with Diana. And though he rarely spoke publicly about it, his position as both Diana's past lover and Michael's mentor made him an unspoken third figure in their story. Even after Diana ended her romantic involvement with Gordy in 1970, his impact lingered. The love triangle, real or perceived, fed gossip that followed Diana for decades. It also left Michael torn, his devotion to Ross always complicated by the reality that she once belonged to the man who had given him his big break. As Diana Ross, now 81, finally confesses her love for Michael Berry Gordy's role, comes back into focus. He was the architect of Motown's myth-making, the man who tied their lives together in 1969, and the silent presence that shaped a bond the world is only now beginning to understand. Katherine Jackson. Katherine Jackson has always been known as the quiet strength of the Jackson family. As the matriarch of one of the most famous musical dynasties in the world, she raised 9 children in a modest home in Gary, Indiana, while her husband Joe Jackson drilled them into global stardom. Yet when it came to her son Michael's bond with Diana Ross, Katherine played a role that was far more personal and far more complicated than the public ever knew. When Motown brought the Jackson 5 to Los Angeles in 1969, it was Berry Gordy who arranged for Diana Ross to act as their glamorous patron. Michael, just 11 at the time, moved into Diana's home where she became both mentor and muse. Katherine, meanwhile, observed this new relationship from the sidelines. In her memoir, she wrote about how Michael referred to Diana as Mama and even teasingly called her his girlfriend. Katherine acknowledged that her son was utterly enchanted by Ross, admiring her elegance and beauty to the point of comparing his sisters unfavorably. "You're not pretty until you start looking like Diana," he would tell Janet and LaToya. As Michael grew older, Katherine realized that his attachment was no passing phase. He carried a love for Diana that blurred the lines between admiration and romance. By the early 1980s, when rumors spread that Michael had proposed and Diana had briefly accepted, Katherine's protective instincts flared. She reportedly confronted Diana directly, telling her she was too old for her son and warning that the relationship could damage both their reputations. To the press, Katherine did not mince words. Her statements about Diana corrupting Michael fueled headlines that painted Ross as a cradle robber. This reaction devastated Michael. Though he adored his mother and often sought her approval, he could not let go of Diana. Katherine's opposition effectively pushed Diana away, and shortly after, Ross married Norwegian businessman Arne Næss Jr. The timing broke Michael's heart. Friends recalled that he poured his anguish into music, channeling his frustration into songs like Dirty Diana, while privately struggling with the fact that the woman he loved most had slipped out of reach, partly because of his mother's intervention. Still, Michael's devotion to Katherine never faltered. She remained the anchor of his life, the guardian of his children after his death, and the family figure he trusted most. Yet his decision to name Diana Ross as the secondary guardian in his 2002 will revealed the lasting tug-of-war between the two most important women in his life, the mother who raised him and the muse who inspired him. Now that Diana Ross, at 81, has openly admitted her love for Michael, Katherine's role gains new clarity. She wasn't simply a bystander. She was a mother fighting to protect her son from scandal. But in doing so, she may have been the one person powerful enough to keep Michael and Diana apart. Eddie Kendricks. Eddie Kendricks, co-founder and lead falsetto of The Temptations, was one of Motown's brightest stars in the 1960s and 1970s. Known for his angelic tenor voice on hits like Just My Imagination and The Way You Do, The Things You Do. Wipe Diana, already the crown jewel of Motown thanks to her leadership of the Supremes, had been romantically tied to Berry Gordy for years. Yet even as she navigated that relationship, she secretly became involved with Kendricks. Their affair was passionate but risky, as Eddie was already married. Motown executives feared the fallout Gordy's jealousy, the threat to the Temptations' reputation, and the potential tarnishing of Diana's carefully managed image as Motown's golden girl. The label tried to silence whispers, but the intensity of their connection was difficult to contain. For Diana, Kendricks represented another chapter in her turbulent search for love. Already scarred by Gordy's criticism of her weight and appearance, she turned to men who seemed to adore her unconditionally. Eddie offered excitement and escape from the pressures of being Motown's most scrutinized star. Yet the relationship shadowed by secrecy could not survive under the label's watchful eyes. Michael Jackson, though younger, would eventually enter Diana's orbit, just as her ties to Kendricks were unraveling. By the time the Jackson 5 joined Motown in 1969, Diana was already carrying the weight of past affairs, including her entanglement with Eddie. For Michael, who idolized Diana as pure elegance and perfection, the messy reality of her romantic life was hidden. But those close to the Motown family knew the truth. Kendricks had been one of several men who filled Diana's world with passion and complications long before Michael dared to dream of her as his own. The contrast between Kendricks and Michael was striking. Eddie was a seasoned performer entangled in adult scandals and infidelity, while Michael was an 11-year-old prodigy just beginning his career under Diana's wing. Yet their stories intersected through Ross, who became the emotional bridge between Motown's past and its future. Diana's history with Kendricks only emphasized how different Michael was. Innocent, devoted, and deeply in love with her without ulterior motives. When Diana Ross, now 81, finally confessed her true feelings for Michael, the revelation cast her earlier affairs, including with Kendricks, in a new light. They were part of a pattern of turbulent relationships that never offered the devotion she later recognized in Michael. Eddie Kendricks had been a chapter of excitement, but Michael Jackson was the love she admitted she never stopped carrying in her heart. Kendricks's role in this story highlights how Diana's romantic past shaped the guarded, complicated woman Michael adored. And as Ross breaks her silence today, his name resurfaces as one of the figures who defined her journey before she found and lost the most enduring bond of her life. Francesco Scavullo. Francesco Scavullo was one of the most celebrated fashion photographers of the 20th century. Known for his glamorous high-gloss portraits of stars like Barbra Streisand, Cher, and Grace Kelly, Scavullo helped define the look of magazines such as Cosmopolitan and Vogue. His lens captured beauty with a sharp, almost dreamlike intensity. But beyond the fashion spreads and iconic covers, Scavullo was also linked to one of Motown's greatest legends, Diana Ross. At a time when Ross's personal life was already complicated by her ties to Motown founder Berry Gordy and her secretive relationship with Eddie Kendricks, she crossed paths with Scavullo in New York's high society circles. He was openly gay, yet Diana's magnetic charm blurred boundaries. According to insiders, she seduced him in spite of his sexuality. Their affair, however brief, highlighted Diana's extraordinary ability to captivate anyone she wanted. Artists, musicians, businessmen, and even those who might have seemed emotionally unavailable. For Diana, the attraction to Scavullo wasn't just physical, it was about validation. Throughout her early career, she was criticized by Gordy for her appearance, her weight, even her confidence. Scavullo, whose artistry celebrated beauty in all forms, saw her differently. In his eyes, she wasn't simply Motown's polished star, she was a muse. That recognition may have offered Ross the confidence she desperately needed during a turbulent period in her life. Michael Jackson, meanwhile, was quietly watching Diana's world from the sidelines. By 1969, he had already moved into her home, idolizing her as both mentor and dream woman. He was too young to understand all the romantic entanglements surrounding her, but those who knew Diana knew she was far from the untouchable goddess Michael imagined. Her involvement with Scavullo underscored the gulf between Michael's innocent devotion and the adult realities of Ross's complicated love life. Years later, when Michael poured his heartbreak into songs like Dirty Diana, many believed he was reflecting not just on his own pain, but also on the pattern of relationships Diana had chosen. powerful men, famous entertainers, and fleeting romances that always pulled her away from him. Scavullo may not have been a long-term partner, but his presence in her story added to the web of secrets that surrounded Diana, shaping the narrative Michael could never fully penetrate. Now, at 81, Diana Ross has finally admitted the truth about Michael, that she was crazy about him and loved him deeply. Her confession reframes her earlier relationships, including with Scavullo, as part of a restless search for validation that only found purity in Michael's devotion. Unlike her liaisons with Gordy Kendricks or Scavullo, Michael offered something different: loyalty without condition. Francesco Scavullo's role reminds us that Diana Ross lived in a world of constant temptation, a place where beauty and power collided. Yet amid the photographers, actors, and moguls who came and went, Michael Jackson remained the one man whose love was unwavering. And now, with Diana's words at 81, the contrast between fleeting affairs and lasting devotion has finally been laid bare. Warren Beatty. Warren Beatty's name has long been synonymous with Hollywood charm scandal and conquest. As an Academy Award-winning actor, director, and producer, Beatty built a career not only on films like Bonnie and Clyde 1967 and Heaven Can Wait 1978, but also on his reputation as one of the industry's most notorious playboys. By his own account, he was romantically linked to hundreds of women, from Natalie Wood to Madonna. Among those women was Diana Ross, Motown's golden star, whose allure extended far beyond the stage. Their involvement came at a time when Ross was navigating a turbulent personal life. She had ended her long, complicated romance with Motown founder Berry Gordy, a relationship that had produced her first daughter, Rhonda. Her affair with Temptations singer Eddie Kendricks had sparked whispers within the label, and her fleeting entanglement with photographer Francesco Scavullo showed her hunger for attention and validation outside Motown's circle. Enter Beatty, the ultimate Hollywood bachelor known for his pursuit of glamorous women and his unwillingness to settle down. For Beatty, Diana was another jewel in his glittering social crown. She embodied both fame and beauty, a superstar in her own right, who could match his public charisma. Their romance, though brief, lit up gossip columns. Photographers captured them at parties and red carpet events, fueling tabloid speculation about whether the Motown diva had finally found her Hollywood counterpart. But for Diana, the relationship was less about lasting love and more about image. Beatty's presence beside her allowed her to step outside the insular Motown bubble and appear as a crossover figure in Hollywood's social elite. Michael Jackson, however, viewed Diana through an entirely different lens. By the time Ross was linked with Beatty in the 1970s, Michael was quietly deepening his devotion to her. He wasn't a playboy chasing another glamorous conquest. He was a young man building a shrine to Diana in his home, cherishing photographs of her and writing love into his music. Where Beatty represented fleeting excitement, Michael represented permanence. This contrast became painfully clear in the years that followed. Beatty, true to form, moved on to other high-profile romances, eventually marrying actress Annette Bening in 1992. Diana, meanwhile, would continue her own restless search for stability, entering into a marriage with Robert Ellis Silberstein, and later with Norwegian businessman Arne Næss Jr. But through all these changes, Michael's devotion to Ross remained a constant. Even in his 2002 will, decades after her fling with Beatty, he entrusted Diana with the guardianship of his children, a gesture no other man in her life inspired. Now, at 81, when Diana Ross finally admits she loved Michael Jackson deeply, the revelation redefines her past romances. Her time with Warren Beatty, once a headline-grabbing liaison, pales in comparison to the enduring emotional bond she shared with Michael. Beatty may have been Hollywood's consummate ladies' man, but to Diana, he was only a passing chapter. Michael, the boy who adored her, and the man who never let her go, was the truth she carried all along. Robert Ellis Silberstein. Robert Ellis Silberstein, often called Bob Ellis by those who knew him, was a successful music executive and businessman when he married Diana Ross in 1971. Their union looked like the perfect fairy tale, the Motown superstar settling down with a wealthy, polished man who could provide stability after years of scandal. But beneath the glossy magazine covers and staged family portraits, their marriage was a carefully maintained illusion, one that indirectly deepened Michael Jackson's complicated love for Diana. At the time, Ross was navigating one of the most sensitive chapters of her life. She had just ended her long, stormy romance with Berry Gordy, Motown's founder, who was also the father of her first daughter, Rhonda. To avoid public embarrassment and industry backlash, Ross entered into marriage with Silberstein, who agreed to raise Rhonda as his own. To the world, their first family photos seemed picture-perfect, but insiders knew the truth. Silberstein was playing a role covering for a relationship Diana wasn't ready to expose. For Diana, Robert offered calm. He was wealthy, respectable, and uninvolved in the messiness of Motown politics. He provided the kind of stability she had rarely known in her love life. Yet the marriage lacked the deep passion she secretly craved. Even as she appeared by Silberstein's side, Ross was still entangled in emotional ties with Gordy and increasingly with Michael Jackson. Michael, who had moved into Diana's home just 2 years earlier, was quietly watching from the background. Still a teenager, he idolized Ross as his dream woman. To him, Silberstein represented yet another barrier proof that Diana would continue to align herself with men who fit a certain image, even if the relationship wasn't rooted in genuine romantic love. Michael's heartbreak would later echo in his music, where songs like Remember the Time revealed his longing for a love that always slipped away. Silberstein and Diana's marriage produced 2 daughters together. Tracee Ellis Ross, now a celebrated actress best known for Blackish, and Chudney Ross, who went on to become an educator and entrepreneur. Though Robert and Diana divorced in 1977 after 6 years of marriage, he remained in his daughters' lives and kept a cordial relationship with Ross. Looking back, Silberstein's role in Diana's life highlights the pattern that shaped her relationship's men who offered status or security, but never gave her the profound devotion that Michael embodied. When Diana, now 81, finally admitted, "I was crazy about Michael, and I loved him a lot," she revealed that the truth she had carried all along was not about her public husbands, but about the boy who became a man while silently cherishing her. In many ways, Silberstein was a protector, a steady presence who shielded Diana from scandal at a critical time. But his marriage with her, built more on necessity than passion, ultimately stood in sharp contrast to Michael Jackson's unwavering love. And that contrast, decades later, makes Diana's confession all the more powerful. Smokey Robinson. William Smokey Robinson, often called the poet laureate of soul, is one of Motown's most enduring icons. As the silky-voiced frontman of The Miracles and later as a solo star, Robinson wrote and performed some of the label's most unforgettable hits, from Tracks of My Tears to Cruisin'. For decades, he was celebrated not only for his artistry, but also for his close friendship with Berry Gordy and the entire Motown family. Yet in 2023, Robinson shocked fans by revealing a secret affair with Diana Ross, a revelation that cast new light on her lifelong connection to Michael Jackson. Smokey's relationship with Diana stretched back to Motown's earliest days. Both were protégés of Gordy, and both rose to prominence as cornerstones of the label's empire. To the public, they seemed like family. Behind the scenes, however, their bond crossed into intimacy. Robinson admitted that while Diana was married to music executive Robert Ellis Silberstein, she and Smokey carried on a romance that lasted for months. This confession stunned longtime fans who had always seen Diana as Motown's polished, untouchable golden girl. The timing of this affair mattered. Michael Jackson, who idolized Diana from the moment he moved into her home in 1969, was slowly maturing into a young man deeply in love with her. While he was cherishing Ross as his muse and imagining her as his future wife, she was entangled in complex adult relationships, first with Berry Gordy, then with Silberstein, and secretly with Smokey Robinson. To Michael, Diana represented idealized perfection. Smokey's revelation decades later reminded the world that she was human, flawed, searching, and often caught between desire and responsibility. For Ross, the affair with Smokey was another attempt to fill the emotional gaps left by Gordy's criticism and Silberstein's calm but loveless marriage. Robinson admired her talent and beauty, and unlike Gordy, he didn't try to control her career. Their relationship was passionate but fleeting, overshadowed by Motown politics and their existing marriages. Still, the very fact that Diana was involved with Smokey Gordy's best friend and confidant added another layer of scandal to her already tangled love life. When Robinson finally spoke publicly about their past, it reframed Diana's legacy. Fans began to see her not just as Michael's untouchable muse, but as a woman who had lived a complicated romantic life before she ever admitted her love for him. It also gave Michael's devotion to Diana more poignancy. Surrounded by men with divided loyalties, she never received the kind of pure, unconditional love he offered. Now that Diana Ross at 81 has confessed she truly loved Michael Smokey, Robinson's admission feels even more important. It proves that for decades, Ross kept secrets about her private life, choosing silence over scandal. But Michael was different. He wasn't a hidden affair or a fleeting romance. He was the one man whose love she acknowledged publicly, even if only in her later years. Smokey Robinson's revelation reminds us that Diana's path to truth was littered with secrets. But at the end of it all, the love she finally confessed wasn't for a Motown peer like Smokey, it was for Michael Jackson, the boy who grew into the man she never stopped cherishing. Gladys Knight. Gladys Knight. The Empress of Soul has built a legendary career on powerhouse vocals. Timeless hits like Midnight Train to Georgia and her work with the Pips. But beyond her own success, she also played a quiet yet pivotal role in Michael Jackson's rise, and by extension in his lifelong connection to Diana Ross. Long before Diana admitted at 81 that she truly loved Michael, Gladys had already shaped the path that would bring the two icons together. In 1968, before the Jackson 5 became household names, Knight spotted something extraordinary in the young group from Gary, Indiana. She saw the spark in Michael, the energy, the voice, the charisma, and she urged Motown founder Berry Gordy to take a closer look. Alongside Motown executive Suzanne DePass, she advocated for the Jackson brothers until the label agreed to sign them. History, however, would tell a different story. When the Jackson 5 officially debuted with Motown in 1969, it was Diana Ross, not Gladys Knight, who was credited with discovering them. Berry Gordy, who was romantically linked to Ross at the time, believed her glamorous star power would lend the group extra publicity. The narrative stuck, and Diana became the face of the Jackson 5's introduction to the world. This reshaping of history did more than sideline Gladys Knight. It also placed Diana Ross directly in Michael's orbit, creating the living arrangement that allowed him to stay in her Los Angeles home and develop the deep bond he carried throughout his life. Had Gordy allowed the truth to stand, Michael's trajectory might have been different. He might still have risen to fame, but without Diana's intimate mentorship and the complicated love story that followed. For Gladys, being erased from that chapter never soured her on Michael. Throughout the years, she spoke warmly of him, praising his artistry and humanity. She often described him as gentle, sensitive, and destined for greatness from the very beginning. She also empathized with the pressures he endured, noting that fame weighed heavily on a child who was thrust into stardom too soon. When Diana, now 81, finally admitted that she had loved Michael deeply, it brought Gladys's role back into focus. Without her, Michael might never have been positioned in Diana's home, and their emotional bond might never have developed into the love story Diana only confessed decades later. In a sense, Gladys Knight was the silent architect of one of the most important relationships in music history, not because she intended to play matchmaker, but because she recognized Michael's brilliance before the world did. Today, Gladys Knight's contribution reminds us how often women in the music industry were overlooked, their roles minimized in service of more marketable narratives. Diana became the face of Michael's discovery, but Gladys was the one who saw the spark first. And by opening that door, she set in motion the story that Diana Ross in her 80s finally had the courage to tell that she loved Michael Jackson, not just as a friend or protege, but as the man who carried her heart. Suzanne DePass. Suzanne DePass may not be a household name like Diana Ross or Michael Jackson, but her influence on their story is undeniable. A sharp-eyed Motown executive with an instinct for talent, DePass was one of the first to recognize the extraordinary gift of the Jackson 5. Without her, the chain of events that eventually bound Michael to Diana Ross and inspired the truth Diana only confessed at 81 might never have unfolded. In 1968, DePass was working at Motown under founder Berry Gordy. She, along with Gladys Knight, was impressed by the young Jackson brothers after hearing about their local performances in Gary, Indiana. Michael, just a boy, already displayed a maturity and charisma that rivaled seasoned performers. DePass pushed for Gordy to audition the group, confident they could become Motown's next sensation. Once signed in 1969, the Jackson 5 were primed for stardom. But Gordy, ever the master of publicity, wanted a glamorous face to introduce them to the world. He chose Diana Ross, his then lover and Motown's reigning superstar, to take credit for discovering the group. The move sidelined DePass's real contribution, but it also changed history. It placed Michael directly under Ross's care. It was DePass's work behind the scenes that ensured Diana became the Jackson 5's official patron, even arranging for Michael to live in Ross's Los Angeles home. What began as a publicity stunt turned into a life-altering arrangement. Ross mentored Michael, guided his early performances, and became the object of his deepest devotion. Decades later, when Diana admitted she had loved Michael, fans could trace the origins of that bond back to DePass's quiet decision-making. Beyond this pivotal moment, DePass carved out an extraordinary career of her own. She went on to become one of the most powerful women in Hollywood, producing television specials, films, and events that highlighted Motown's enduring influence. She earned 2 Emmy Awards, a Golden Globe, and multiple nominations for her work, making her one of the few African-American women of her era to break through the industry's barriers. For Michael, however, DePass was part of the invisible machinery of Motown that shaped his destiny. He knew Diana Ross as the glamorous woman who introduced him to the world. But behind that introduction was DePass's strategy. Without her foresight, Ross might never have become the mentor, muse, and love that Michael cherished throughout his life. When Diana Ross at 81 finally confessed she was crazy about Michael and loved him deeply, it was a moment that reframed decades of speculation. And in that confession lies a hidden truth. Suzanne DePass was one of the unseen architects who made their relationship possible. Her decision to spotlight Diana over herself linked Ross and Jackson, forever setting the stage for one of music's most enduring and complicated love stories. Cindy Birdsong. Cindy Birdsong, once a member of Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, became forever linked to Motown history when she replaced Florence Ballard in the Supremes in 1967. Though immensely talented, her arrival created a turbulent shift within the group, one that indirectly affected Diana Ross's life, at a time when her personal struggles were hidden beneath her glamorous facade. At the height of the Supremes' fame, Berry Gordy pushed Diana Ross into the spotlight, renaming the group Diana Ross and the Supremes. For Florence Ballard, this was the beginning of the end. When Ballard's clashes with Ross escalated, Gordy replaced her with Cindy Birdsong. Cindy, with her angelic voice and graceful stage presence, was a stabilizing force. Yet her presence also reminded Diana that she was not untouchable. According to insiders, one of Diana's lowest professional moments came when she performed poorly on stage after struggling with alcohol. That misstep gave Gordy the excuse to elevate Birdsong temporarily, signaling to Diana that even as Motown's star, she was replaceable. The rivalry may not have been as public as the infamous Ross-Ballard tension, but Birdsong's shadow haunted Diana's career. This was the world Michael Jackson stepped into when he joined Motown in 1969. While Michael adored Diana unconditionally, Diana herself was navigating insecurities, competition, and the pressure of being Berry Gordy's chosen star. Cindy's quiet presence symbolized everything Diana feared: being dethroned, being forgotten, being just another singer in the machine. Michael, too young to fully grasp the politics, saw only Diana's grace and brilliance. But Diana's confession at 81 that she truly loved Michael suggests that his unconditional devotion gave her something she couldn't find in Motown's ruthless hierarchy security. Birdsong later left the Supremes in 1972 to raise her family, yet her role in Motown history remains crucial. She was the woman who proved to Diana that perfection could be threatened. And it was Michael, adoring her through every shadow of doubt, who gave Diana the validation she once sought from Gordy, from rivals, and from audiences. Lionel Richie. Lionel Richie, frontman of the Commodores turned solo megastar, became one of the most successful entertainers of the 1980s. With hits like Endless Love, All Night Long, and Hello Richie dominated charts and award shows. But behind the music, his connection to Diana Ross intersected with Michael Jackson's private world in ways that fueled tension and even inspired art. Richie's friendship with Diana blossomed in the late 1970s and early 1980s as both artists transitioned into new career phases. In 1981, they recorded Endless Love, a duet that topped charts worldwide and became one of Motown's most successful singles. Their chemistry on stage and in the studio sparked rumors of a romance. For Michael, who idolized Diana as his ultimate muse, this collaboration was more than music, it was competition. According to insiders, Michael was unsettled by Diana's closeness with Lionel. He had spent years vying for her affection, building a shrine in his home, devoted to her, even proposing marriage in the mid-1980s. Seeing Diana alongside Richie, hands intertwined on stage, their voices blending seamlessly, stirred feelings of jealousy and betrayal. These emotions poured into Michael's work, most notably the song Dirty Diana. Though officially framed as a song about obsessive groupies, many believe it carried Michael's anger toward Diana's history with men like Richie Barry Gibb and Gene Simmons. For Diana, Richie represented safety and artistic partnership rather than dangerous scandal. Unlike Berry Gordy, he wasn't trying to control her. Unlike Warren Beatty, he wasn't chasing headlines. Their bond was professional, affectionate, and perhaps tinged with romance, but it lacked the depth of Michael's unwavering devotion. Richie himself later became tied to Michael in another way. In 1985, the two co-wrote We Are the World, a charity single that raised millions for famine relief in Africa. On paper, it symbolized unity. Behind the scenes, it also linked the two men through Diana, one as her public duet partner, the other as her secret lifelong love. Barry Gibb. Barry Gibb. The eldest of the legendary Bee Gees, was one of the most influential songwriters and performers of the 1970s and 1980s. With his falsetto soaring over hits like Stayin' Alive and How Deep Is Your Love, Gibb helped shape the disco era and secured his place as one of music's most powerful figures. Yet outside of the charts, Gibb's name occasionally surfaced in the orbit of Diana Ross, where whispers of their closeness complicated the already tangled web between Ross and Michael Jackson. Diana Ross and Barry Gibb crossed paths often during the late 1970s and early 1980s, when both were global superstars. Gibb admired Ross's elegance and artistry, and she respected his songwriting genius. Rumors swirled of late-night meetings, flirtations, and even a brief romantic involvement. Their names appeared together in gossip columns, and while neither confirmed a full-blown romance, the speculation was enough to unsettle those closest to Diana, particularly Michael Jackson. Michael had by then grown into adulthood and was deeply in love with Ross. He had proposed to her in the mid-1980s, and fans spotted a ring on her finger at major events. But Diana's reputation for surrounding herself with powerful men, Berry Gordy, Smokey Robinson, Warren Beatty, and now Barry Gibb, left Michael feeling betrayed. The lyric in Dirty Diana that mocked a woman for loving boys in the band was widely interpreted as a veiled reference to Diana's pattern of gravitating toward famous musicians like Gibb. Gibb's connection to Diana highlighted the contrast between fleeting adult affairs and Michael's enduring devotion. Where Barry represented charisma, glamour, and the lifestyle of the rock elite, Michael offered loyalty, innocence, and a lifelong love. Ross's late-life admission that she was crazy about Michael reframes her rumored ties to Gibb. Whatever spark may have existed with the BG was temporary. The real emotional thread in her life was Michael, who cherished her above all others. Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons, the towering bassist and co-founder of the rock band Kiss, built his career on spectacle. Known as the Demon, Simmons was larger than life, spitting fire, wearing armor-like costumes, and shocking audiences with his stage persona. Offstage, he was equally notorious for his romantic exploits, boasting relationships with countless women. Among the names tied to him in the 1980s was Diana Ross. Their involvement drew tabloid attention, pairing Motown's queen with rock's most flamboyant bad boy. Simmons's relationship with Diana was brief, but impactful. For Michael Jackson, who adored Ross as his muse, seeing her linked to Simmons was painful. The tension escalated into open rivalry. Simmons reportedly bristled when Diana, in a moment of intimacy, accidentally whispered Michael's name. The slip ignited jealousy, leading to a feud between the two men that lingered for years. For Michael, Simmons symbolized everything he feared losing Diana to older, aggressive men who treated love as conquest rather than devotion. This rivalry fed directly into Michael's music. Dirty Diana, with its biting lyrics about manipulation and betrayal, was believed by insiders to reflect his anger not only at Ross, but also at the men he felt had taken her away. Simmons, with his public bravado and playboy persona, became a stand-in for the kind of love Michael despised: loud, shallow, and destructive. Diana, for her part, seemed to enjoy Simmons's wild energy, but never built a lasting relationship with him. She eventually distanced herself, returning to more stable partnerships. Yet the memory of her involvement with Simmons remained one of the sorest points in Michael's private life. Now, with Ross at 81 finally confessing she truly loved Michael Simmons's role in her past, looks more like a diversion than a destiny. He was a headline, a spark of scandal, but never the lasting love she cherished. By admitting her devotion to Michael, Diana effectively placed Simmons where he always belonged in her story, on the margins, as one of many who came and went while Michael remained the constant in her heart. Madonna. By the mid-1980s, Madonna had become the queen of pop, commanding headlines with her bold sexuality, fearless reinventions, and chart-topping hits like a Virgin and Material Girl. She and Michael Jackson, both born in the 1950s, were generational counterparts. Their fame parallel, their cultural impact undeniable. When the two were linked in the press as friends and rumored partners, it didn't just excite tabloids, it unsettled Diana Ross. Michael admired Madonna's daring persona. She, in turn, was fascinated by his artistry and fame. The two shared public appearances, most famously attending the 1991 Academy Awards together. Their chemistry sparked endless speculation about whether they were romantically involved. For Diana, who had always been Michael's muse, seeing another global superstar capture his attention fueled jealousy. Insiders noted that Diana would sometimes appear at award shows and events where Madonna and Michael were rumored to meet, as though unwilling to let him slip away. Michael, however, never treated Madonna the way he treated Diana. With Ross, his devotion was lifelong, rooted in the intimacy they shared when he lived in her home as a boy. With Madonna, their connection was more performative, an alliance of icons rather than a deep romance. Still, the media frenzy surrounding them played into Michael's frustration with Diana, who herself had often chosen high-profile men. It mirrored his pain of watching her with Barry Gibb, Gene Simmons, and Lionel Richie. In his music, these conflicting emotions surfaced. Dirty Diana was often assumed to critique Madonna-like figures, bold, seductive women who represented everything dangerous about fame. Yet Michael always denied a direct link, insisting the song was about groupies. Behind the denial, however, lay his complex feelings about women who competed with his devotion to Diana. Now that Diana, at 81, has confessed she truly loved Michael, the Madonna chapter becomes clearer. Madonna was a rival only in the public eye, a fleeting distraction amplified by the press. Diana's confession erases any doubt. No matter how many headlines Madonna and Michael shared, it was Diana who held his heart. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor, the Hollywood icon, famed for her violet eyes, 7 marriages, and tireless activism, became one of Michael Jackson's closest companions during the later years of his life. Their friendship was genuine and profound. Taylor stood by Michael during his darkest moments, from tabloid scandals to courtroom battles. Yet even this intimate bond could not displace Diana Ross as the central woman in his heart. Taylor and Michael's friendship began in the 1980s, when the two discovered a shared experience of growing up in the spotlight. Both had been child stars who endured the pressures of fame from an early age. Elizabeth provided Michael with empathy and wisdom, and in return he offered her unconditional loyalty. She attended his concerts, defended him in the press, and even introduced him to the world of high society philanthropy. The press occasionally speculated about romance between the two, but both denied it. For Michael, Taylor was a confidant, not a lover. Unlike Diana Ross, who embodied his ideal of romantic love, Elizabeth represented understanding. She saw his pain, validated his struggles, and helped shield him from a world eager to tear him down. For Diana, however, Taylor's closeness with Michael was another source of unease. She had been his muse, his secret love, the woman he once proposed to. Watching him share intimate moments with Taylor, even if only as a friend, reminded her that others were stepping into roles she had once filled. Those whispers of jealousy never faded, even as Ross pursued her own relationships. Michael himself drew distinctions. To him, Diana was the goddess he worshipped, the unreachable love he never stopped chasing. Elizabeth was the friend who healed his wounds when Diana's absence cut too deep. Both women shaped his life, but in entirely different ways. Brooke Shields. Brooke Shields was one of the most recognizable faces of the 1980s. From the Blue Lagoon to Calvin Klein ads, she embodied youthful beauty and Hollywood glamour. She also became one of Michael Jackson's most high-profile companions, appearing alongside him at award shows, galas, and in tabloid headlines. To the public, Brooke and Michael looked like the perfect couple. But behind the flashing cameras, their bond was more about friendship and appearances than the romantic devotion Michael reserved for Diana Ross. Michael admired Brooke's elegance and innocence. He once called her one of the loves of my life, and she frequently attended his concerts and public events. Yet when asked, Shields clarified that their relationship was affectionate, but not deeply romantic. She described Michael as a sweet friend who confided in her, someone she cared for like family. For Diana Ross, however, Brooke's closeness with Michael stirred jealousy. Diana had long been his muse, the woman he once proposed to, the person he immortalized in songs. Watching him share red carpets with a younger starlet reminded her that others could capture the spotlight that once belonged to her alone. Ultimately, Brooke Shields symbolized Michael's attempt to move on. While Diana was elusive and complicated, Brooke was safe, accessible, and admired by the public. But as Diana finally admitted at 81, she was the one Michael always loved most. Brooke's role was important, but temporary proof that even global icons sometimes sought substitutes for the love they could not have. Tatum O'Neal. Tatum O'Neal, the youngest actress ever to win an Academy Award at just 10 years old for Paper Moon, shared the experience of child stardom with Michael Jackson. In the late 1970s, when Michael was entering his 20s and struggling to navigate fame and relationships, O'Neal became his first publicly acknowledged girlfriend. Their connection was innocent, almost awkward. Michael, shy and soft-spoken, was captivated by O'Neal's confidence and independence. They spent time together in Los Angeles, and he often spoke fondly of her in interviews. But according to both, the relationship never progressed very far. Michael was nervous around intimacy, and O'Neal later clarified that their bond was sweet, but not deeply romantic. Compared to his feelings for Diana Ross, Michael's time with Tatum was fleeting. Ross represented the woman he wanted to marry, the goddess he idolized since childhood. O'Neal was more of an experiment, his first attempt to engage in a teenage romance under the scrutiny of fame. When Ross later confessed at 81 that she had loved Michael, it cast his earlier relationships into perspective. They were part of his journey but never the central story of his heart. David Guest. David Guest was a producer and television personality best known for his flamboyant personality, eccentric friendships, and brief marriage to Liza Minnelli. But behind his colorful public image, Guest was also one of Michael Jackson's trusted friends. Unlike the glamorous women linked to Michael, Guest's role was not romantic but confessional. He was one of the few people Michael shared his deepest secrets with, including those about Diana Ross. Guest often spoke about his conversations with Michael, claiming that the king of pop confided in him about intimate encounters and private struggles. One story he shared was of Michael being invited to a leading ladies' room on a film set, an experience Michael revealed only to him. While Guest never betrayed Michael by naming names, his recollections painted a picture of a man torn between innocence and desire, fame and loneliness. For Diana, Michael's bond with Guest was significant. It proved that while she was his muse, he still needed confidants who could listen without judgment. Guest provided a safe space for Michael to speak the truths he couldn't reveal publicly. When Diana Ross at 81 admitted she was crazy about Michael and had loved him deeply, it validated what Guest had long implied: Michael's heart was tied to her, even when he confided in others. Guest's role was not to compete with Ross, but to bear witness to Michael's love for her, a love that even decades of secrecy couldn't erase. Diana Ross's confession at 81 has reignited one of music's greatest mysteries: was her bond with Michael Jackson a forbidden romance and unspoken love, or simply a lifelong devotion the world never fully understood? For decades, fans speculated, critics doubted, and the media twisted their story. Now, with her own words confirming the depth of her feelings, the debate is louder than ever. Do you believe Diana and Michael were truly soulmates? Or was it a love story that existed only in fragments? Share your thoughts below. Legends of Black Excellence wants to hear your voice.